Hello, thank you for joining me for the ongoing series of just looking at these moments where God invades Earth. Last time we picked up in Genesis 15, where God met with Abram as he was known then. I want to follow this story through a little bit rather than just leave it hanging there, because the story of Abraham, he has a promise of God that he will have a child, and then the promise of God doesn't happen in the way that he thinks it should, in the timing that he thinks it should. He looks at his circumstances, he looks at his age, he looks at his wife's age, looks at all those sorts of things, and comes to the conclusion that he better find a way of making it happen with the help of his wife. And he ends up sleeping with Hagar and having um, another son, Ishmael, who at that point he believes will be the son of inheritance. So that's the little bit of background, and it really does set it up for God to meet with Abraham again, or Abram as he's known. And there's quite an important shift that happens here. So I want to look at Genesis 17, and it's another pivotal point for Abraham, a time when he meets with God and things change. It says that Abraham was 99 years old, and the Lord appeared to him. And so it's again a moment where God breaks in to Abraham's world. Look at his age; he's 99 years old. This is a time when most people are even beyond retirement. But God speaks to him and says, "I'm the Lord Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless." And in some ways, this word it speaks backwards, but it also speaks forwards. And if you think about it, Abraham was already been told that he was righteous because he trusted, because he believed God. And now he's getting a command: be faithful and be blameless. Well, his previous actions weren't blameless. He was trying to work it all out, wasn't he? But it's like this constant declaration. It's the same declaration, I think, that is so valid over us today, is that our call is to walk before God faithfully and blameless. If you messed it up yesterday, there's a clean slate today. If you messed it up this morning, there's a clean slate today. And that's the nature of the kingdom. Again, you can emphasize the danger. The danger is, well, if I know I can do what I like today because tomorrow I'll be clean. But that isn't the heart of the gospel. The heart of the gospel is, don't sin that grace may increase, but enjoy the grace that we live in. And so God carries on and says, I will make my covenant between me and you will increase greatly in number. And in the Old Testament, this is among a number of encounters God has with different people, where it ends up with a covenant being formed, an agreement, a binding agreement between man and God. The ultimate covenant, obviously, is that binding agreement with Jesus that he makes available to us. And it says, Abraham fell face down. He knew that he was encountering God. That's one of my prayers, is that we have moments that are so awesome. We know we're encountering God. I think sometimes in church we can end up moving the furniture around, trying to make ourselves feel better, but actually what we're really looking forward to is an encounter with God that changes things. And what's revival? It's an encounter with God where God comes and there's an increase in numbers. And Abram, remember his name's Abram still. Says he's told, "This is my covenant with you. You'll be father of many nations. You'll no longer be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings come from you." So just put yourself in Abram, let's use that name, shoes. He's been told there's a change in name, and the name means father of nations. He hasn't got his own children. He's 99 years old. So he's going to be required in front of people to make a shift, to make a change, to position himself in line with a promise. And it's the promise that he'll be faithful, that there'll be nations that come from him, that kings that come from him. The ultimate king being Jesus himself, the King of Kings. And God says, I'll establish, in verse 7 of chapter 17 of Genesis. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. And Abraham's line, goes right into Jesus. He's the ultimate fulfillment of this promise and this covenant. And he said, the whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. So again, God's just pointed to something that's really part of our who we are as a people. He's saying you have a place to possess, but it's where you're a foreigner, and we're really foreigners on earth. We're called to be journeyers through earth. We're not living as this is our destination. We're living on a route through. Um, and so what was the requirement on Abraham? As for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you for generations to come. And then he speaks of this sign of circumcision, for every male, and that will be a sign of the covenant that they'll be circumcised at 8 days old. The circumcision, as you see in the New Testament, is one of the heart. It's we're set aside in an eternal covenant because our hearts such as circumcised before God. That's a whole separate area. So God goes on in this encounter. You see, what I want to be drawing out here, this encounter with God is changing everything for Abraham, changing his name, changing his identity, changing or bringing in line his purpose. And now the overflow of this is immediately onto his wife. He says, as for Sarai, your wife, she will no longer be called Sarai, if I said that right, but her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and surely give her a son, you a son by her. Now, remember, they'd given up. Hagar had Ishmael, and so here's her promise that she'll be a mother of nations, king of peoples, and kings of peoples will come from her. It says Abraham fell down. This is such an encounter with God that it's changing everything. But there's a challenge in his heart. It says he laughs to himself. Ha! Yes, will I have a son at 100 years old? Will Sarah have children at 90? And so he starts to try and negotiate with God. He says, what about Ishmael? He could live under the blessing. God says, yes, but your wife Sarah bear a son and call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him. And he promises to bless Ishmael as well. So in this moment, the grace of God is such in this encounter that a child born of a plan of man, there's a promise and a blessing that he will be blessed. And it said, basically, when he'd finished speaking to Abraham, God went up from him. At that time, Abraham was 99, Ishmael was 13. And you go, wow, an encounter with God that has lined and changed Abraham's life. It's lined him up for a purpose that didn't just affect his generation, but went through to eternity. And I think there's something about that. We're looking for encounters with God it can become a selfish thing. I need an encounter with God. But we're looking for encounters with God that change everything, not just for a generation, but for generations to come. Bless you. We'll be continuing next week with this study, looking at different people where God has come to earth. Have a great day. Bye for now.